In my active addiction, I should have lost my job over a dozen times. It's a miracle I didn't get fired. And when I first got sober, I was really hesitant to share my newfound sobriety with anyone for many years. This is how I've dealt with active addiction and sobriety in the workplace.
I'm JT. I'm in my mid-30s, have a 10-year media career, and nearly a decade of sobriety. So how did another middle-class kid turn into a blackout drunk and a heroin junkie? More importantly, how did it change, and where do we go from here? This is my story.
So I'm definitely not going to give any advice on how to handle your addiction in the workplace. My advice would be don't do it. Don't do what I did. But I thought for context, it would be good to share kind of what life was like for me in the workplace before I got sober. I will not use any names of people or business names. We don't need to drum any of that stuff up, do we? But as I explained a little bit in my story video, I went into the workplace right at the same time that I was going full bore into active heroin junkie lifestyle. And it is nothing but a complete miracle, total grace of God thing, and the grace of someone very special at my workplace that I didn't go completely tee up at work, or that they didn't compound on themselves. I mean, the whole thing was a ridiculous house of cards. I talked about my ritual of leaving in the middle of the day when I got my paycheck to go cash it at the Chex Cash place and then go stalk my dealer's house to try to get in. That's just scratching the surface of what my addict behavior was like. I mean, I nodded out in company meetings before and people knew what was going on. I did drugs on the premises. I mean, really like going out of the way drugs. I was obviously sick, withdrawing at work. And most importantly, like the stuff directly related to the drugs is really not the worst stuff. The worst stuff is I was just not very good at my job. And the worst thing was I had like huge opportunity in front of me. And I knew I had a huge opportunity and I knew I was effing it up. It was almost like an out-of-body experience. The way I remember it at the time, what I think of at the time is like looking down at myself going, what are you doing, dude? I mean, I can't think of how many things that came up during my work life where I decided, no, I'm not going to do that because I need to go and get a score. No, I'm going to miss out on this because I'm high, or I can't go and do something that's going to interrupt my addiction. And I knew, it was like looking down at myself going, you would not be making these choices if you were sober. And if you were sober, you would have everything in front of you and you would be totally tackling this thing. And so I knew what a complete mess it was. I mean, I had serious anxiety about going to work because I knew it was just a matter of time before I was going to get fired, before something was just completely screwed up. I mean, my appearance was awful. I wasn't dressing appropriately. I was obviously a physical mess. It was bad. So when I got sober, when I went into outpatient rehab, again, described in my story, I went to work and then at 6 p.m. I went to rehab. And so that was a very high wire act, going in and out of rehab every day and going to my job and sobering up while I'm at my job. And I was very fortunate. Everything about my recovery was fortunate. Everything about my outpatient service that I went to was very fortunate. But I got some great advice while in there. And some of that advice was, look, sometimes when you're getting sober, there's an after effect of your bad decisions and bad actions as you are getting sober. So it's not like just like you get sober and then like nothing bad happens to you because you're doing the right thing for the most part. No, that's what's so hard about first getting sober is there's that after wave effect of your bad decisions finally coming home to roost while you are sober. And so it was multiple months into my sobriety. I got demoted. I was lucky not to lose my job, but I'd like really been doing things the right way for a while and got demoted. And that was really tough. I can't believe it never came up, what I was doing. I can't believe it never came up what I was doing when I was doing the drugs. I mean, a lot of people have told me in retrospect, they never had any idea what kind of hard drugs I was into until I posted my story video on this channel a few months ago. And I mean, I've worked with some of these people for a decade and they never knew how bad it was, but it was bad. And I never had to come clean to anyone about what I was doing. First of all, there's HIPAA laws, so I didn't have to tell anyone, but I thought it would come up, like because I had to so regiment leave every single day, and that whole sort of timeline thing I thought would, at least to the people that I directly work for, come up, that I would have to explain what I'm doing, and I'd have to come clean about how I'm changing my life, all that. I really didn't want to have to deal with that directly right out of the gate. So I was very fortunate. But what started to happen is like what happens with a lot of people when they are getting sober and really doing the work and really starting to get some time under their belt. Good things started to happen. And so I never really had to come clean, so to speak, at my place of business about my sobriety. I never chose to either. And I wanted to give this perspective because I've known many people throughout my 9 years of recovery who have come clean immediately. Sometimes you have to, based on what your situation is. I've known many people who were excited about it and wanted to share it with everyone and wanted to share it on social media. I was never that way. And my initial thought was, if you remember, I was not positive this was going to work for me. I really didn't think sobriety was going to work for me, but I was going to try it out. And so I thought to myself, I really don't want to tell anyone because from my perspective, once I tell people that I'm giving it a go, well, what if I slip? Then they know. So not everyone necessarily knew I had the problem. I think they knew I wasn't like that good of a worker at the time, but nobody knew I had that serious of a problem. And so if I started to tell everyone, well, then now they know. So what if I slip? What if I, just have a beer at an event after I've told everyone that I'm trying sobriety? Well, then all of a sudden, in my mind at least, they're thinking, uh-oh, now there's something wrong. So I was kind of like protecting myself from a slip. And I don't know what an addiction counselor or professional would say about that. But more than anything, I really just didn't, there's the anonymous part about it, and I wanted to keep it anonymous. I didn't see any reason why I had to tell anyone what I was doing. And it was never really a big deal. A few of my closer associates noticed. That's another thing you find out in sobriety. I found out in sobriety is nobody was paying as much attention as you, as me. I was so consumed with what I was doing. It's almost like, it's that thing about being a totally insecure egomaniac. That's what an addict is, because I was so sure. I mean, there was one point during my addiction that I was positive that my boss had another one of my coworkers following me outside of the building to see what I was up to. That's how cuckoo I was at the time. But it turns out that not anyone was really that interested. I'd have questions every now and again, and eventually I just told people, nah, I'm not drinking anymore. It was just like, because I was overweight, I made it kind of like a health thing that I'm not doing it anymore. I didn't really go into too much detail. And that's kind of how it remained for several years. And pretty soon, I went into a different section of the company and I worked for someone who was also in the program. And so then it kind of came out a little bit and I was a little more open to it. But keep in mind, I was never really public with my sobriety until the past year, really. And that's after 9 years. And here's where it changed for me. It changed for me because I'd been quiet and I was protecting myself, right? It was really about protecting me. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it because there is some selfish behavior in making sure I stay alive. And if I thought, and the people around me that I trusted, my sponsor, my friends in the program, thought that keeping it to myself, which is well within the bounds of recommendations of the program, thought that that was the best thing for my sobriety, then I'm perfectly welcome to do that. After I'd had many years and things are going well, that changed a bit. And it changed because another coworker of mine came out about his sobriety. He did it a different way. It was just alcohol, and he did not do it through the 12 steps, which is what I did. But he did have a method. He thought he had a problem, and he came clean about it. And I just had this amazing experience. It's really interesting. I reached out to him and I said, look, you probably don't know this, but like, I went through the same thing and I got sober through the program. And it's just really interesting. We were both going through our struggles and then going through our recovery process, and neither of us knew. And what he said to me was, man, I always thought you were just able to shut it off. And I thought to myself, well, gosh, I don't know that I would want anyone to have the impression that I just shut it off, because we all know it's so much harder than that. And thinking that you could just shut it off is like part of the problem of addiction. I mean, that's what I always thought. I was like, man, all these people who can just shut it off. Well, I could be like that. If I just, train myself the right way, I should be able to just shut it off and on too. And I thought to myself, well, what if I'd been more open about it? What if I'd been more honest about, more transparent about my journey? Could that help anyone? And that's when I started to get into the altruistic, mentioning things when I had a sobriety birthday, stuff like that on social media. I'm really bad about celebrating things. I'm trying to get better at it. I've done a better job of it. As of late, some accomplishments that I've had at work, I've done a better job, even if it's just me, because I have this sad, lonely, single coronavirus world life that I've told you about. And it's not because really of COVID that I am so lonely. It's just that's how it's happened. But, I went and had a nice dinner by myself. I wish it wasn't by myself, but it was. But I went and had a nice, semi-expensive dinner by myself to celebrate, because I'm terrible at celebrating milestones or accomplishments, and I'm trying to get better at that. Point is, I don't know where I was going there. I had a revelation that I needed to be more open about my experience. Look, I may relapse tomorrow. Doubt it. I think I'm doing all right. Never out of the woods. I could go back into the depths of things or relapse and come right back, or who knows how it could go, but it could happen at any time. But I feel secure in who I am in general today via my sobriety. And I feel like if I were to have a slip up, that I would be able to come clean about it and be honest about it and get back on that horse and get better, God willing. I really hope none of that happens, and I'm going to keep doing the work so that none of that happens. And in the meantime, I feel comfortable enough to talk about it and talk about my experience. But at the same time, I really value those years that I didn't talk to anyone at work about it. I'd have people that were super close to me who bring it up every once in a while. And then after a few years, I might totally come clean to someone that I really trusted. Because it's not just that I was sober, it's that I had this huge, really dark past that involved my workplace and people I can't even remember all the stories of people that I work with that we'd be out and about and I'd go on a run for drugs. It's crazy how it intersected. And so I didn't want to bring that sort of triggering, loaded word of heroin into the whole situation. So it had all that baggage, not just that I wasn't drinking anymore. And so I think it's very beneficial. I'm never going to prescribe my way to anyone else, but for me, it was very beneficial to honor my anonymity, to respect my own anonymity as it pertained to work and to social media, especially early on in my sobriety, because it gave me the opportunity to discover it for myself, to not put out expectations. Look, I think it's very good to have people close to you so that they can hold you accountable for, but that's what the program and your circle of recovery is for. That's, in my opinion, that's not what Facebook is for. That's not where people are going to hold you accountable. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Facebook, but I think the connections you have with people, whether it be in person, over the phone, in meetings, those are where the accountability matters, because behind a screen, the whole relationship is just not the same. That's just my opinion. So I feel very fortunate that I had those years to learn and figure it out for myself. And while maybe looking back, it would have been better for me to come clean sooner or be more open with specific people sooner, it was my choice. I believe I was doing the right thing for me. And I think it could be very beneficial for anyone else who's going through that in the workplace when you can manage it. Sometimes you can't because you get so bad that it's work that's making you, go to rehab or take a suspension or something like that. If you can work it out that way, I would highly recommend it. I think it's worth whatever extra steps. And I had to go through a lot of extra steps. It was kind of a tightrope to make sure nobody knew that I was in rehab and that I was sober and had been sober for a while before I finally came clean. It was a good decision for me. I'm glad I did it that way. If I had to do over again, I probably would do it the exact same way that I did it. Maybe, like I said, I would open up a little bit sooner to specific people. But I think it's very beneficial. It protects you. Anonymity is part of the program for a reason. This is just one of the reasons it's part of the program. But I can choose to respect my anonymity, not someone else's. I always respect other people's anonymity, but mine is to share or to not share how I please. Okay, let's get the mail. Mail today, a comment from Instagram from Pink Flamingo. Love that name. Recovery is hard. I am surrounded by others who are in complete denial about their own drinking and pressure my boyfriend and I constantly. They don't seem to understand that it's not just one drink. Sending lots of love and support. Stay strong and true to yourself. Thank you so much. Fantastic feedback. Thank you for the love and support. I will do my best to stay strong and true to myself. Being able to do these videos helps with that. I'll just comment on your thoughts, your feedback here in your post. Recovery is definitely hard, and being surrounded by others who are either not supportive or have their own issues is very difficult. There's a reason that in the program it's often said you need to change your surroundings in terms of who you interact with. Your playthings, your playmates, you should change them. Now, it's really hard to just cut people completely off unless it's literally cutting off a drug dealer. It's hard to cut off friends where everyone kind of feels like it's normal. I would highly recommend trying to find ways to spend less time with people who are bringing you down in any circumstance. But I would also say I would try to not focus on what others' drinking problems may be, because quite frankly, that's none of my business. It's none of my business what someone else's drinking problems are. But if their attitudes are harmful to me, I think I just probably don't need them. And if I can, and sometimes these are complicated, sometimes it's family. You've heard about my shtick about, getting hotel rooms or whatever around family and always having an escape hatch. But that goes for friends too. And especially with friends, sometimes the best thing to do is to just shut it off or just put it on pause for a little bit. You don't have to say anything. But I have friends that I've just now rekindled relationships with because it wasn't the best thing for me coming right out of sobriety, coming right out of addiction. In fact, I'm still dealing with going back to my old stomping grounds in Fort Worth at college because it just brings up so many memories of this guy that I don't think I am anymore, and I have had dealt with a lot of guilt and shame of in the past. Made it very difficult. If the friendships are meant to be, they will be around to be mended later on. The most important thing, I think, for someone that's sober or newly sober or trying to get through sobriety and has people around whose attitudes are problematic, I think the best thing to do is to provide some distance for yourself if possible. Not understanding that it's not just one drink is a huge deal. You hear me talk about that all the time. That's what saved my life over and over again, is to know that moderation is not recovery for me. Moderation doesn't exist. I tried moderation. It took me many years of an active addiction and a problem before I realized that abstinence was the only way for me. By the way, that's just the start. Just not drinking is just the start. Then I had to do the work, and I'm still doing the work now. But like I said, I'm hearing a lot of things here that make me think it might be beneficial to try and put some distance with those attitudes that are creating issues for you in your own sobriety. Thank you so much, Pink Flamingo, for the feedback. If you would like to share, you can comment right here on the video. You can reach out at any of the following, comment on posts, send DMs. Would love to hear from you. Would love to start a dialogue. We'll see you next time. Hey family, if you like what we're doing here and you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Share it with someone who you think might benefit from watching this, and feel free to comment below. Love.